Hello, I am Megan.
And I'm Michael.
And we are starting our first marriage podcast. We are called Chesed Marriage Podcast. And I wanted to explain a little bit about where that came from. So I think, was it 2 years ago when we saw the engagement project and we heard it?
3, I think. 2.5, 3.
Okay. So Del Tackett, an incredible biblical pillar in our generation, in our time. He started a series called The Engagement Project. And one of the words that kind of stuck with us, which it went into our real estate business at the time, which is another story. But at the time, that was the name that Michael felt like we needed to have for our real estate business. And Chesed actually is Hebrew for the meaning of kindness or love between people, specifically of the devotional piety of people towards God, as well as love and mercy towards God and humanity. So the reason why we chose Chesed is because it means loving kindness. And so, of course, when we're talking about God's loving kindness towards humanity, we wanted to put that towards marriage because, as we know, the marriage between a husband and a wife, between a man and a woman, as God ordained it biblically, that is the most physical manifestation of what God really wants in his relationship between man and people, or man and himself. And so it means
it's the closest this side of heaven of the true intimacy of the triune of God.
So, and then, in English terms, it just means giving oneself fully with love and compassion. So, of course, we're all very well aware of how physically in a marriage we can give ourselves to each other, which will be another episode. But we just really felt like it was time. And we just came back from a marriage conference this past weekend, and I think both of us decided, it needs to happen. There's a couple in a podcast that we absolutely just love and honor and respect. And if you are unfamiliar with the Naked Marriage Podcast with Dave and Ashley Willis, that's something that is, they're truly the pioneers of marriage podcasts. And of course, they came out of the XO marriage ministry, which we started going to the XO conferences starting in 2017. So for us, like year 3 of our marriage, year 7, and I would say year 10, because that was 2020, where there was huge shifts in our marriage. The first 2 were really, really rough. But we decided in 2017, when we first heard about the XO marriage conferences, we started attending those right after the Kairos ministry that we went to through Gateway Church. Anyway, so that's kind of where this has started. I guess it's been a long time coming, and finally we just really felt like the Lord has just opened the floodgates for us to do marriage ministry, because it's always been something on our heart, and we're still very, very young in marriage. We'll be coming up on 14 years in December.
Better get it right.
14 years. Anyway, so without further ado, we'll start with this is our first episode, and that just kind of gives you an idea of where it came from and why. So I've been talking a lot. Would you like to explain our family dynamic and just kind of share a little bit about what we have?
So we're a family of 6. We got a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, and twins that are 3. We have a very active lifestyle, 90 to nothing most of the time. Very busy schedules. I work in corporate and petrochemical industry, and my wife was a teacher.
Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
It's my story to tell. Yes. So Michael really felt like he had a call to do real estate. He's always, since we dated in high school, that was really what Michael wanted to do. He wanted to do real estate. Our date nights would consist of going to open houses, and he would show me drawings that were in his mind of house plans. And I'm just, I'm thinking about not houses. I'm thinking about being a mom or being a teacher, and I wasn't thinking about houses, and that was all he wanted to do. So real estate has always been, I guess, in his DNA. And so I taught, I went to teaching, and the past 3 years, he's really asked me gently if I would consider doing real estate. And I guess it kind of started when we went to the Lifestyles Expo. I thought everyone in that room had drank the Kool-Aid and they had lost their mind. It didn't help the fact that his best friend told him to go, and his best friend grew up on a goat farm. And I was like, nothing good, kind of like when in the Bible it says like nothing good can come from Nazareth. I was like, nothing good can come from a goat farmer. Of course, it was so good. But at the time I was
worked past those challenges.
Yes. And I was very bitter about it because it was not something that it was familiar to me. It was very foreign, and I felt really uncomfortable. I literally felt like I was in a new country. And already it's funny to look back at it now, because when you're in it, when you're in a really rough season, all you can focus on is what's inconvenient and what hurts and what's not fair.
What's in the moment.
And looking back now, and we talked about this last night at church, it's like, how do you keep pressing forward in a relationship with the Lord? And you make those monuments in your life, and you put a stake in the ground and say, this is where the Lord was faithful. And so I look back at that and I just laugh at myself. But anyway, fast forward. This past October, we went to a marriage conference. It was Love Always, which is put on by Gateway Marriage, or Gateway Church in South Lake. And
we do one in the spring and one in the fall.
Highly recommended. So we went, and I had 3 very specific prayer requests, because when I signed my contract to teach this year in August, it was one of the first times that I felt like this isn't right, but I did it anyway. And it had nothing to do with my team. It had nothing to do with my administration. It had everything to do with where I was spiritually. And I didn't feel peace about it. So August comes, September comes, October, we go to the conference. And I told Michael on the way up there, it's a 4-hour drive. I was like, I'm asking the Lord for 3 things. Number 1, I'm asking, am I supposed to be in real estate? Because he had mentioned the word real estate. And I said, absolutely not. I've been hearing about it for 3 years and I'm tired of it.
It was more like, when will you shut up and quit asking me about it?
Just bluntly stated. Don't sugarcoat it, babe. And then the other one was if I needed to continue on with D group, which is another conversation for another time. And then the third was, what's next? And very clearly, it was, I won't go into detail, but the Lord was so, so gracious and so beautiful. There were some really incredible moments. And there was a lot of healing that had taken place in the past 3 years during this time since Michael even asked and opened the door. There's been so much healing in my heart. And very clearly the Lord was like, you will resign in December. Now, just my background, I am a bilingual teacher. I taught 4th grade, and it would have been in December. So if you know anything about education, it's a testing grade, it's a specialized content area, and it's in the middle of the year. And I said, Lord, it can't be, like, I can't, and I'm such a people pleaser, which he's working that out of me, but all I could think about was, I'm going to let so many people down. Like, this can't be right. This can't be you. Well, came back from the conference, and I told my principal that I was resigning, and she said, when? And I said, December. And she said, okay. And I told my students' parents that next Tuesday, and I told the students Tuesday, and it was awful. It was awful. And I kept saying, Lord, is this you? Am I making the right decision? Is this the right thing? And finally I said, Lord, if this is you, kind of like Gideon, Lord, if this is you, make the fleece wet. And it's like, Lord, if this is you, send somebody to replace me. And, always on time. The following week, my principal called me in, to her office, and she said, Megan, I think this is a God thing. Someone is graduating from Sam Houston. She's getting she has her bilingual degree. She wants to do an upper grade, and she has to have a job for January. And I put my hands up, and finally, for the first time in, I'm going to say 15 years, because that's really when I really decided to turn my life over to the Lord. I'd always been saved, or I had been saved when I was 8, and then rededicated my life when I was 15. And then, life happens. You become a young adult and you're stupid. You make really bad decisions. But I would say like a solid 15 years, I finally said, Lord, take control. Take control of my life, because I'm tired of living it the way that I want to live it. So I got my license in March, and it's been incredible. Like, why haven't I done this for the past 3 years? I don't know. It's been so incredible. So anyway, there's that. So I'm full-time real estate. He's full-time in the petrochemical plants. And you didn't mention Sophia.
No, I'm still working on it.
Okay.
I had to tell a story.
Sorry.
So we got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and twins that are 3, like you said. And our 10-year-old has epilepsy. She has some medical conditions. There was periods in our marriage where that consumed every aspect of everything we were doing. There was a period where it was very life-threatening, and we had to make a lot of
really hard decisions,
permanent decisions for her and on behalf of her, without her even really knowing what we were doing. So we have a lot of different family dynamics, and in our 14
years, yeah,
in December, to draw from that, the Lord's really used to help share with people around us and couples around us, and just really the tug at our heart has been to be as transparent as possible as the Holy Spirit leads, to help show people that you're not alone. There are a lot of challenges and struggles out there, but He is faithful, and He walks us through that. And regardless of what the horizon looks like, or the immediate looks like, or the storm looks like, He's still there with His hand reached out for you. And our hope with this is to share part of our story, but not only our story, but help facilitate the stories of people that God's brought in and out of our lives.
Yeah.
To show you the faithfulness of Him from every angle of life, every walk.
And how, like, our big desire is, because we're in the age group right now where, people have been married for at least, over 5 years, and things change. People's attitudes change. Am I that loud? People's attitude changes. Their wants, their needs, their love languages change. The way that they communicate changes, and sometimes it changes for what we've witnessed or what we've seen is sometimes it changes for the good, and sometimes it changes to where marriages end. And we know that there is an enemy that does all he seeks is to steal, kill, and destroy. And the one thing that the enemy, or anyone for that matter, can take away from us is our relationship. Number 1, our relationship with the Lord. And number 2, our relationship with our spouse. And that's something that we've been very, very passionate about, is we're so drawn to the covenant of what marriage is and what it really means. And
explain what a covenant is, in case somebody doesn't understand.
I love this part. Okay. So, covenant in the Old Testament.
And don't eat the mic, because it'll clip.
Covenant in the Old Testament means, what they used to do is there were 2 parties. Whenever they came to an agreement, they would sacrifice an animal.
Which signified there was a price that had to be paid.
Because
you couldn't enter in a covenant without it costing you something. Something had to die.
And I love that you brought that up, because in a marriage, what people think is it's 50-50. And it's like, it couldn't be farther from the truth, which is what the enemy will have you believe. 50-50 equals 100, so we're 100% in. It's like, no, marriage is 100 on both sides, 100% giving in, dying to yourself, choosing to die to yourself every day. And I know this is going to sound like a very harsh word, but serving your spouse in the Chesed way, in a loving kindness way that benefits and that shows over and above loving kindness for your spouse. And so in the covenant in the Old Testament, they would split the animal, and the two parties would walk across or walk in between the animal, and there was blood that was shed. And so what that signified is I'm giving my word, and I'm giving my side of this testament that I'm going to be faithful to see this through to the end. And when the Lord established marriage from the very beginning, it was always meant to be a husband and a wife and him. Mm-hmm. And that's what he established. That's how he wrote it. That's how he wanted it. And so many shifts in our society will say that marriage is love between any person, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. And that's where we're going to stand. This is a biblical, Judeo-Christian biblical point of view, because we know that everything else in this world is going to pass away, but the words of God will never pass away, and that is a truth that he's established. And so a covenant is a commitment between two people. So going beyond, even in marriage, whenever Hebrews or Jews in the Jewish culture, whenever they would get married, there was actually a sheet, the consummation sheet, that they would display on the night of a marriage ceremony to show the consummation and the covenant that had been made between the husband and the wife, and they would display it. And if I don't have to get very explicit, but to show that this was a covenant, that this was a testament, that this was a sealed promise till death. So it's marriage isn't just a piece of paper. It's not just a
construct.
It's not a contract. It's not a construct. It's not an ideal. It's not a principle. It's
a choice.
An establishment by God, ordained by him. And it's actually where the family starts. A lot of people will think that the family starts whenever you have a kid, and that's not true. A family starts when you seal that covenant between a husband and a wife, and that becomes a family. The children are the fruit of that, and children are a heritage from the Lord. They're a display of his faithfulness and goodness. And there will be episodes where we have couples that, we have several lineups for the episodes that we're wanting to introduce. So what we're wanting to introduce is topics that are rough to talk about, topics that are raw. And since I just mentioned children, I think children biologically and obviously non-biologically, those are God's heart too. His heart, number one, is to orphans and widows. And so when I say children are a heritage, they don't have to be your biological children. And we are going to have a couple that's going to be part of our podcast on an episode just talking about how they navigated through that and how they still see God faithful. Because this side of heaven, there are going to be struggles. This side of heaven, there's going to be pains. And what we want to give our generation and what we want to give through this podcast is how people navigate the things that are really hard to understand, but from a biblical point of view.
Because we're one of the most connected generations in the history of the world, mm-hmm. but we're also statistically the loneliest. And this is another forum that we feel like we can help reach the individuals that are in that realm, because we have individuals that come over. We've had couples show up 8 o'clock in the morning and just want to spill their guts. We've had phone calls at 1, 2 a.m. to friends and acquaintances, but there's also people that we know in our peripheral as well as in our community and in our demographic that this can reach, that we can't reach mm-hmm. every day, and that's okay if we don't physically get to talk with them. But if there's something that we can do to help them, give them hope, because the other underlying lie that we've seen in our own lives, in our own marriage, as well as in a lot of our peers that we chat with and have confided in us, is the lie that you're alone.
Yeah.
And that you're the only one that's actually caring about your marriage. And so pro tip, if you ever catch yourself feeling like you're doing everything in your marriage, that should throw up a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one's ever 100% innocent or 100% guilty. And there's always a part, and I know I have some friends that disagree with me on this, but there's always a part that you can own to a certain degree, and I firmly believe that. And
just wanted to throw this in there. I started reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And just the very first habit that I'm learning about is taking ownership of your own. And an example of this morning, I was brushing Selah's hair, and I brushed too hard. And Selah, she immediately was like, "Ow, mommy, that hurts."
She's one of our twins.
She's one of the twins. She said, "Ow, mommy, that hurts." And what came out of my mouth was, if you would just, and immediately I was like, it was me. I had to take ownership of what I did. And what I did was I was brushing her hair in a hurry, and it was an inconvenience for me. And so I said, "You know what? I'm sorry. I brushed your hair too hard. I wasn't careful. I'm sorry." And she immediately said, "It's okay, mommy. It was an accident." And I said, "No, it wasn't an accident. I brushed your hair too hard, and I'm sorry." And I mean, it's just a tiny little shift, just taking ownership of your own. And especially when it comes, that's something simple, but teaching her that I made a mistake.
And so creating an avenue for people to understand that they're not alone, that the enemy also will help make you feel, or help you to feel, that you're the only one that's ever felt this way. Or if you ever married Mr. or Mrs. Right, then everything would be perfect. When the reality is, none of us are perfect. And love is a choice. Marriage is a choice.
That was in the book too. It said that love is a verb. It's an action. It's not a feeling. It's not a noun.
It's a choice to pursue, just like Christ pursued us.
Yeah.
In our brokenness, he pursued us. In our faults, he pursued us. And he never stopped. It's an unrelenting pursuit. And that's the model on how we are to love our wives, as Christ loved the church, and he's never turned his back on the church. And we always look out for me and I, and helping to create that air and that example, if we can, where I've taken my lumps, and maybe I can help someone not have to take the same lumps that I have and mistakes that I've made, and help their marriage is something we're willing to do because it's a passion of ours. The passion of ours is helping build community from the micro to the macro, meaning from the micro starting in the marriage, then go into the family, then go into the homes, which is more of the macro, which then goes into the neighborhoods. But we can get into that in another time.
So I'm pretty sure we're getting close to out of time, but we're going to try to keep these anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes. But I wanted to introduce the future episodes that we had talked about coming up. So the next one that we're going to have, and we haven't really decided how soon these are going to be, but we just kind of wanted to throw this out there. So, I would like to do one every week, but I think that's going to be a lot. So we may have 1 or 2 a month. We can start there. That's a goal. But the ones that are on my heart are affairs. So a couple that we've had, we have several, but we'll be asking the Lord for just direction on that. But the next episode that we would like to focus on is affairs and how to navigate that and forgiveness in the biblical aspect. After that, it will be alcohol. So, just navigating the abuse of alcohol and even drugs and how that affects a marriage or how that affects a person.
And then one after that, I think we're going to talk about overcoming our past and baggage that we can bring from our past.
Yeah.
And extremes. And the Lord can redeem us redeems all of us, but sometimes it's hardest for our family and the people that are closest to us that knew us prior to be able to see where we're at in the future. So hopefully we'll have one of those somewhere in there, as well as one of my favorite topics, finances. And
obviously that's still a sore subject, but the Lord's working on me. So yeah, but how to navigate finances. And then, I mean, there's so many topics that we've, one that is personal to us is pornography. But that comes with, part of your past and like the struggles that people have dealt with. And then one that's very personal to me is lust. So we are going to be very transparent. These are probably going to be more geared towards a more mature audiences, not meaning that we're going to say curse words or anything, but the content that's in here, if you're going to listen to it like in the car or something like that, just keep in mind that the content that's going to be on is going to be a little sensitive for littles. So we may have an episode where we have the littles on here. I think that would be really cool. I'd really like to hear Judah's aspect about how our children perceive our marriage. So those are the things that are coming up, and we just want to thank you for taking the time to listen.
And hopefully we'll see you on some more episodes coming up.
And I did want to say, if there's a topic that is just burning in your heart that you're like, well, how do you do this? Or how do you deal with this? Please, 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 type a comment, in the comments, area, and just let us know what is something that's on your mind that you want to know. Well, what about this? No one's ever told me about this. And how do you deal with that? And we will find the experts, because we are not experts, but we are glad to navigate that.
And my wife's very tenacious, if you haven't figured that out, so we can find the people.
Megan Tenacious Spear. So thank you so much. This is the Chesed Marriage Podcast, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.